Hey, it's Kevin Deutsch and welcome back to the Recording in a Home Music Studio course. In this video, we're going to talk about recording virtual keys or pianos. So virtual keys, as with all the other topics we have done on virtual instruments here, this again is just another virtual instrument, okay? You may be looking at creating a synth style sound, or you could be going for a real authentic piano sound, grand piano, whatever sort of piano, and you're using virtual instruments to do that. Now the process of this is just pretty much identical to what we've done with our virtual bass or anything else that we've done that's practically been virtual. Now, as with everything else virtual, we have plenty of options of software to use for that. There could be, hopefully you've got some software included in your recording software already that you can use. Alternatively, you can buy third-party products. There's some fantastic ones out there, and I will show you some examples that I have, and we'll run through a few things there. Now, how you actually record that is again the same as what I've talked about in previous videos. We are going to basically set up our track, our instrument track or Midi track, however it's named in your software. We're going to load up a virtual instrument that we choose that sounds good, run through the different settings, etc., to get the sound that we want. And then we just need some way to actually input the data into it. So we can either draw them in manually into our Midi chart there in the software, or we can use an external Midi controller, you know, like a USB style keyboard or something like that that generates Midi data and can record that data onto the track. Now, the great thing with Midi instruments and virtual instruments, that sort of stuff, is that you have the ability to copy the Midi data that you have written and place it onto another instrument track and pull up a totally different sound. So we could create a melody on a piano sound, but then we may want to say, okay, in a certain section of our song, we want a violin or something to duplicate that exact same melody. Now, we don't need to technically record that again. We can just copy that data to another track, load up another virtual instrument, set it to what we want, say a violin, and it will play the exact same notes, but now on a violin. Now, sometimes that may not come across exactly right because you may need to play slightly differently to get the right vibe with that instrument, but it's definitely worth trying, just copying the Midi data over, seeing if it gives you the sound you want. If not, then re-record the part, no problem. All right, so let's go across to my song now and we'll see what piano or keyboard parts I feel will fit into the song, and I'll show you how to set it up, show you some virtual instruments and get them recorded into my song. All right, so here we are back in Cubase, and we are now going to set up our tracks for our virtual keys. So far our song has got quite a few tracks going. We're starting to really build this up bit by bit. And now we're going to add some more elements and we're going to look at our virtual keys. So with the virtual keys, it is pretty much the same as every other virtual instrument we have done so far. So there is nothing really unique about this process other than it's a different sound. So basically, we are going to create an instrument track, and we're going to pick our instrument itself. So in my case here, I'm going to go with Quantize 64 just because it works really well with my Rolly C-board external controller. And I'm going to set the bus to the keys bus because this is going to be our keys track. So in my case here, to save some time in these videos, I've already sort of worked out my part and had a bit of a rough go at working it out and working out where I want to place it and all that sort of stuff and what sound I want to go for. And in my case here, I'm going to go for a straight piano sound, all right? Because And the reason I'm going for a piano sound is because we obviously have more elements to go through in this course. So we still have an external electronic sort of synth sound. We still have orchestra and stuff like that. So I need to make sure that these are clearly defined. Now, this keys part could have been quite simply a synth. It could have been a pad. It could have been anything, but that in itself would have potentially hindered me creating the other parts. So I'm saying this because I'm doing some of these sounds to benefit the course. And, you know, if I was not doing this as a course and I was not making sure that I could record each one of those elements, then I might have decided that I was not going to record my external electronic synth, and I may have done this component with my virtual keyboard as a pad or a synth or something like that. But as I said, to allow me to be able to do all of the elements, I have decided to make this pretty obvious and do this as an acoustic piano. All right, so we're going to select that, and then we can name it. So we'll call it V piano, or it could be called V keys, whatever. Going to give it our color. So in my case, if I look across, we got purple is for our keys. And again, it is no different to any other virtual instrument track, all right? There's no need to do the monitor button. We do need to record enable. I have this ASIO latency compensation on, which just allows, in my system here, for the track to line up to all the audio tracks more correctly. And we can set our MIDI input to what we want. And I'm just going to leave it as all MIDI inputs because I only have one going anyway. And because it's a Rolly C board, there's a couple of settings I do need to change just to get all of the features of it working. Now with the Midi C board, it has multiple sort of touch points and can vary note pitch and stuff like that by, you know, doing almost like vibrato. Because I'm going for a straight piano, I'm going to be turning those features off because I want it to work just like a standard piano sort of keyboard. So no variance in notes. It'll just be straight on notes, pretty straightforward. So once we have all that set up, we just need to make sure that our sound is coming through. And we can also pull this up here. So if we go and hit a couple of keys on the external keyboard. All right, so you could hear there, as I said, straightforward piano part, nothing spectacular there. Now it's just a matter of actually going and recording each of our sections that we determined, whether we do bits for the chorus, the verse, the bridge, etc. So in my case here, I wanted to make sure that my chorus sort of stood out a little bit. So I have come up a part for the chorus. So we're going to do that one first. Okay, let's start recording the chorus now. All right, little mistake in there, but we'll live with that for the moment. We can easily edit that. But what we're going to do is anyway, we'll do the second chorus and the third chorus just so we do each one. And we can sort of chop bits and pieces from each one to make it the best take, I guess. All right, and the lucky last chorus. All right, so now that we've got our chorus parts done, minus a little bit of editing and fine tuning, we're going to do our verse part. Now, what I decided was that verse 1, I'm going to probably not have this part in. Now, we can always copy and paste it if we decide that we want to have it in, but I want to sort of build the song up a little bit. So I want to keep the first verse fairly thin, and so it's not going to have the piano in it, and I'll add the piano to verse 2 and verse 3. And again, when we get to the mixing stage, we can make decisions about that. Or, you know, even at the end of this process, we can cut a bit out if we feel that it's not necessary. But we'll add it to those two so that they're a little bit different to the first verse. And we're having our song sort of build up. So let's go and record that part now. Okay, so again, that's not too bad. Maybe a couple of mistakes and tweaks to fix up. We'll do the other verse. If you haven't really determined it yet, by seeing what I'm doing. I'm not a piano player, and this is me sort of hacking away at what I think might sound okay. And it's probably totally wrong, and obviously the way I play the keyboard is not very professional, but you know, it gets the job done. So let's do the verse 3. All right, so now we're going to do a part in the bridge, and this time I wanted to add something a little bit more dramatic as opposed to calming and soothing like I had before, because the bridge does take that little bit of a turn. So we've got some sort of fast, choppy, staccato type parts that I'm going to do here. So let's record it and you can hear what I'm doing. All right, so quite a few mistakes there, but again, we'll clean it up in a minute. Now let's just do the same thing, but we'll do it on the outro. Okay, so now we want to go and edit it and just make sure it's right. You know, feel free to re-record it if you prefer to do all your stuff live. And, you know, if any mistakes, just re-record, punch in, whatever you want to do. I'm actually going to edit it because, as I said, I'm not a great player anyway. So I'm going to be quantizing things and getting it more right on the beat and more consistency with the notes, etc. Okay, so I'm going to run you through a little bit of the editing process just so you can see what I'm doing. And again, as I said, whether you do this or re-record, that's entirely up to you, how you prefer to do things, and, you know, your sort of work ethic, model, whatever, you know. So anyway, I'm going to open the, so basically if I just double click on the part, it opens up my Midi track editor here. So you can see down the bottom here all the velocities, and you can see all of the notes, and you can see how they're all sort of laid out and where they hit, etc. Now we can get rid of some of these obscure notes here. So the first thing I'm just going to flick through, just glancing, is to make sure that we at least have hit all the right notes and we don't have any wrong notes being hit, which we are good there. Now the next step might be to say, how about we quantize everything and get it all on the beat. So we could have a look at it. I'll do it part by part is what I would probably do. So we can open up our quantize here. And we can change whatever settings you like. Let's leave it as 16th notes. Okay, so obviously you can change all of these. You can change your swing values if you want it to be a little bit more natural. You want to do any sort of fancy type things here. But if I didn't want to, and if I just want to select all those and quantize, and then we can flick through and have a look to see how they sort of hit, and that they're all hitting on the beat. Now, depending on what value you pick, you might find that certain things go a different way and things like that. Okay, so we can listen to that. We find the spot. Let's get to there. Alright, so it sounds good from a on the beat type thing because obviously we've quantized it. Now the other thing you can do is, one thing that sort of stands out to me is the note lengths. Right, so there's two things left for me looking at this: note lengths and velocity. Now, again, depends how much of a natural feel you want to go for as opposed to a very sort of precise. So I might say, where is the lock to grid? So if I lock to grid, I might want to just lock these all to, a specific sort of entire value there and not go over, not go under sort of thing. Right, so let's say I want to get all of these to be perfectly the same sort of length, except for these bass notes. Ignore the bass notes here. So let's say I bring this down. And what we can see is if I I've got my grid at 16th notes, and we can see that we want these ones here sort of an 8th note, okay? So what I can do is I can actually come here and say select all of these top 2 rows. And I can set my grid to 8th notes, and then I can actually come over here to where it's got length. And I can actually click on this button that says fixed lengths. And it will adjust every single one of these notes I've highlighted to be an 8th note in length. Now it looks weird here because of the grid, but if I put the grid back to 16th, you'll see they all now are precisely an 8th note in length. Okay, now, what about this bottom one here? Well, this one's a little bit trickier because what I sort of want is an 8th note for this first note, and then these other ones I want to be a 16th. But how can we do that without really affecting everything? So I sort of want, Now let me just have a look. It's sort of the first one of the bar, right? Every first one of the bar I want to be there. So what I'll do in this case is I'll actually select the lot and I'll select the 16th note. And again, I'll do a fixed note. Okay, so it should now have made them all 16th notes. Now, the reason I did that is because the majority of the notes are 16th notes. Now what I have to do is, look, I could go and manually, with the control key, select each one. And you know what? Let's do that. The other idea is that now that I know that it's just these first ones, I could just come in and just quickly drag them across, which is probably actually faster than selecting each one, to be honest. And because this is the smaller amount of notes, it's less notes that I have to manually edit. So if we drag each one of the first ones across, right, so if we listen to it now, this all should be pretty perfect. Okay, so there you go. So, you know, you might say, hey, that's a bit robotic or something like that. But to be honest with you, this is what I'm going for. I'm not a keyboard player. I'm doing just something that fits and sounds okay. Now, what's still missing is velocity here. Some of the notes sort of disappear. Some of the sort of, we'll call it a chord, even though it's really only sort of two notes. Well, it's a broken chord. We'll call it that. Some of them don't hit right because of the velocity. You can see some of them are really soft and things like that. So what you can do is go and set all the velocities to be the same if you so wish. So we could come here and we could just sort of pick a spot and you could zip across. All right. Now, that hasn't set them all the same, but we could set them all the same. But you could also vary them. Now, I'm just thinking what I want to do. Do I want them all the same? But we may want the bass notes to be a different value to everything else. Okay, so we could go for a fixed velocity, which means they'll all sound exactly the same. Let's get back out of this. So yeah, just right-clicking on them, you can go over to functions here, velocity or fixed velocity. Now, if we go velocity, we can set an amount. We can add or subtract. We can compress, expand, limit, whatever, you know, so you can just pick whatever you want or just have it set to fixed. Now, if we have it set to fixed, they're all pretty heavy. Okay, so we just turn the volume down a little bit, but I sort of think that maybe that bass element doesn't need to be as high. So if I go velocity, if we subtract an amount here, I'm not sure how much, Let's go with 40. We'll see what happens. Okay, I like that. So we've just set the bass note to be a little bit softer. Sounds a little bit more in line with what I was playing and a little bit there, but it's obviously very consistent. Now, as I said, you could go in here and you could adjust them randomly. You could do whatever you want to make it sound a little bit more natural if you so choose. I'm pretty happy with this really locked in, solid sort of rhythm pattern there. I think, yeah, I'm happy with that bit there. So what we're going to do, to save having to edit the other choruses, because I'm happy with that, I'm just going to be doing a copy and paste with this. So I'm going to come in here first and I'm just going to trim it. I'll trim it to one little bit before the start. And we'll come to the end here. Get this verse out of the way for a moment. And I guess I'll go one after as well. Now we'll need to get this verse back in a minute, but we'll do that shortly. So I'm just going to copy, Control C, and then we'll come across to the next chorus. Let me just zoom out a bit. So again, let's move the verse out of the way. And let's get that out of the way for sure. Right, so we can delete it. Now, what was one line? Was it there? I don't know how zoomed in I was. Let's just paste it in and let's just have a look at it on the grid. Okay, we want it to line up there. Right, so now we can play this part. Drop the volume of this again because this is a bit loud, but just wanted to easily hear it. Okay, that's good. And then what we do is we come to our last one here. And okay, that's the verse. Let's hang on, let's just trim this. I just want to get these parts a little bit isolated here. Okay, so again, got our chorus. Let's get that out of the way. So again, we'll delete that one there. And we'll zoom in a bit. Just bring it back a bit there, and then we'll zoom in and drag it to the line. Right, so again, last chorus. I'm just going to do a save. So I'm happy with that. We've got our chorus locked in. Now, got to look at our, not that one. We're going to look at our verses now.